We're back again with another episode. I have today senior product designer. She is a Jedi when it comes to design. I met Miss Bleu Buffington on LinkedIn. We connected, and she was so gracious enough to bless me with her time. So, Blue, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, I'm looking at your portfolio right now. It's pulled up right here. You're doing amazing things, right? So, when we're talking about product design, can you break down what is a product designer?
I mean, it's a little bit of everything, in my opinion. A product designer looks at not only the user experience, but the UI as well. We're looking at the product and the business strategy as a whole. And it was interesting how I got into it because I came in from like an entrepreneurial perspective. So I was always looking at things as a whole. So I just naturally flowed into um, doing product design. Within the startup space, it's, I mean, I can do things that deal with particularly like with navigation, then scaling a platform, dealing with landing pages. You have to wear many hats as a product designer.
So, what part of the product design process do you like the most? Do you like the research part? Do you like the actual design? What is it that you favor?
I like the versatility. So
Okay.
I love that with what I do as a consultant currently, every day is different. So some days I may be specifically looking at research aspects and doing like A/B testing and working with the dev team on A/B testing and pushing out a lot of that work. There's some days where I just have my head down and I am focused on doing just design. Like in general, I may be touching up a design system. I love working with design systems. Um, the days vary. It depends on the project. It depends on the scope. It depends on um, I guess, the client too. So just a couple days ago, I was wearing different hats with one client that I would with another. So it just depends. And I love the versatility of it. My favorite thing to probably do currently, though, is working with component libraries. I'm a little obsessed because it makes
Okay.
life.
So break that down. Break that down to me. I don't know what that is. Explain that.
So, working within the design system with one of my clients, we particularly call our component libraries more so to work with component blocks. And
Hmm.
what we do is we use these component blocks to build landing pages more effectively and efficiently for the marketing team. So, I'll work with the content team, the marketing team to make sure everything is divvied out and organized to where we can have reusable component sets or component blocks. And so a component block, the best way I can explain this, it's, you know how you have like a hero image, like for the designers that are out there that are listening at a hero image, and then you have, your CTA or like a secondary CTA, your copy, your heading, your image. Making sure that component block is in a set where it could be as versatile as possible. So when I bring it to the dev team, we can have it all built in Storyblock, which is what one of my clients currently uses, in order to make everything more versatile. So marketers and people like myself can go in and build landing pages really, really fast, which is amazing for A/B testing.
So how much prep work do you have to do? And maybe it's subjective, right? But how much typically like time do you need to prep for, let's say, a new client?
Ooh, well, it depends on what they have for me. So if I'm working with a client who actually has like say if I'm coming into a project that's already been started and they may have like a PM or may already have like a design team, they typically have a design system or something already there. I'm really coming in to work on a particular project or goal. So it may be like a site redesign. I'll ask for like, what's the scope of time? Like what are the resources that we have? That's really the most important thing. I need to know how many resources are available for me before I can scope anything out. If I'm starting from bare bones, it depends on how large the company it is and what type of client it is. And once again, resources. So I would say like for a really, really quick project, like if I'm hopping on to probably like design a Webflow site, um, I would say I would put together a proposal based off of their information, maybe in about like a week or so. I give it time, and I like to go through. my clients with the scope of work. That way we're clear, because I've definitely made those mistakes before where I didn't make a clear contract and I ended up being the one to pay for it in the end. Not fun.
Not fun. Let's stay there. Let's dig a little deeper, right? Like, so when it comes to like, you've done freelance work and you've done other type of projects. Like, how do you, for the designers out there, right? And what should they be doing in their contract to ensure that they're, on the same page as the client?
I think the biggest thing is to really be clear. A lot of the clients that you're going to deal with are not tech savvy. And so one of the things that I used to get in the beginning was, a lot of people think that a UX designer or product designer is someone who does everything. Even though product design is a little bit of everything, you're not, there's some product designers that, specialize in research or specialize or on one of the teams I have, there's this really talented guy. He does product design, but he also does a little bit of development work. So he has like both sides to things. There's a lot of people who will think you are all in one tool and you are not. So it's very important to really make it clear the work that you're going to be doing and how it's going to benefit the business. And if they have any other team, which like sometimes smaller companies, they may outsource like to an agency, or they don't really understand what the agency does. Like ad work is going to be completely different than like your content work, which is completely different than product design. It's really crucial that you let them know exactly what you're there to do. The other mistake that I've made is not talking about revisions. It's really crucial when you draft up your contracts to specifically speak on revisions and how many you're willing to do. And if a client asks for more, the uncomfortable conversation you have to have with them regarding here on out, like if you decide to have more revisions, this is what we're going to go with, because I've made that mistake in the beginning of my career as well, not putting how many revisions on a platform I was willing to do. Also, for new designers, always archive your work. Archive and organize your work. You will have clients that will like one idea, change it, and then after they see it, because sometimes all it takes is for you to see something to realize, like especially from like the UI perspective, or even with like a new flow, make sure you save it, because if they go back and you didn't save it, that's just extra work that you have to do. I mean, there's like a lot of hiccups that I've definitely had along the way, but I've learned from each and every one of them, and it helps me not only grow, but how to handle like, more complex clients and more complex projects, and having the ability to talk to those stakeholders in a professional manner.
So can you really, really like break down UX versus product designer, like a UX designer versus product?
Like UX design, like user experience really deals with just that, the user experience. You're doing the whole thing about research. You're doing information architecture. You're doing, user analysis and competitor analysis. And like there's A/B testing, there's wireframes, there's low fidelity wireframes. UI deals with the way, I think the best way someone described it was UX is the skeletons and your UI is the meat and bones. That being said, with product design, you're looking at the business strategy as well. I think that's the biggest thing that separates UX design from product design, is because you're looking at the product as a whole as opposed to the user experience. So you'll keep in mind with not only business strategy, marketing strategy, you're going to be dealing with, a little bit of everything.
So what industry do you like to work with the most? I see you have a lot of healthcare and you have some entertainment in your portfolio. What industry would you prefer?
Entertainment, because that's how I actually ended up getting into design, like in general. The funny thing is, when I first started off in design, like when I was, I actually did a boot camp for it. They were like, what do you not want to do? And I was like, I don't know if I want to be in like pharmaceuticals or healthcare. And that's actually where I ended up landing. And I like it there as well. I really like learning about all the ins and outs of like my inner health. It's actually gotten me to look at my inner health as I'm designing for the company and researching everything that's out there. So it's actually been pretty exciting. But when I originally landed into design, I went in with the perspective of wanting to be only in the entertainment industry, mostly because I set out to build my own entertainment app. And right before the pandemic hit, I was like, this is something that I would actually really like to do. So I started researching and looking at other designers that were out there. And I mean, that's how it all ended. The two design projects that you do see on my portfolio that do deal with entertainment, one of them actually came from me. I think I introduced you to her. Her name is Miss Alita. With that being said, those projects have been actually really fun. I find more joy because entertainment and music and music rights and data rights, that's like where my passion is at. So I do lean toward wanting to do more entertainment projects, and they tend to be a little bit more on the UI side, a little bit more fun to design for.
So how did you get into design? Like, what was early childhood like? Because it sounds like you've been doing this for how long?
Only about 3 years, not very long at all.
Right. So, having a conversation with your mother, right? I do know your mother. And from what she was sharing with me, once Blue got something, she's going to learn, she's going to dive into it. She's a quick study. So how do you, what is your background like? I'm looking at your portfolio and it looks as if you've been doing this for years, right?
No.
So what was your background?
So my background was actually in the restaurant industry. Like the story was crazy. I was living in Boston. I was on a train on the way to work and I came up with this app idea on the train because I used to love to sing and write music, but the way that the music industry is now, the way that music is monetized and the way data is stored it's not very feasible for the way technology is continuing to advance. So I came up with an app idea and I went to work. I'm a super talkative person. So I was at work. I was like, oh my God, like I came up with this app idea. And everyone's like, hey, you're not going to do it. Flash forward, I ended up moving to the Bay Area and I was like, what's the first step? Like, what do I do to like build an app? Because all I have is an idea. No one takes an idea seriously. And so I was like, okay, let me make a business plan. And so I got all these books on business plans and I started running into and trying to meet as many people as I could that dealt with tech. Because I was like, I'm trying to make an app. Then I moved to LA right before the pandemic. And I was in the process of still serving. I was working in a fine dining restaurant. I was taking that money and meeting up with designers. And I had actually started writing out, I had a whole bunch of research on competitor analysis, marketing analysis. I had a whole bunch of information on just the general flow of how I wanted my app to go, what the users would push. I had all these site maps and I had no clue they were called site maps or flow charts or task flow. I had no clue what I was doing. And I met up with a designer at Starbucks and I was like, this is a really cool job. Like this dude goes around and he brings out a scope and he's doing this for other companies. And I was like, you know what? If my app flunks, because I know a lot of platforms, they just do not make it. That's the reality of it. I want to build for startups, but also in the meantime, I want to learn what it's like to be on the ground floor of a startup so I could see how a company scales. I could see how they launch. I could see where their resources are going, how they communicate. I really wanted to get an inside picture for when I wanted to go back and really relaunch my own platform. So I ended up doing a boot camp. My first project is actually what you see on the site. That's the first thing I ever built, which was Bridge.
Oh.
They let me do my own app as a project. And they're like, are you sure you want to do this? This is complicated. You may not graduate. I was like, I'm up for the challenge. So I did that and I started meeting with music executives. And during that time, I was still, applying to, trying to get entry-level positions. And I ended up getting a contract at my first startup, which I'm still with today. And they've really shaped me and challenged me. So when I got into it, I was like, oh, I'm just going to be doing information architecture. I'm specifically doing UX design. I'm going to be doing low fidelity wireframes and site maps. But through them, I've been challenged to learn product design as a whole. So looking at the OKRs and looking at the business needs of a company in order to create designs that are not only usable for people, but for the business as well. Everything is about scaling. So from just a few bare bones screens with the founders to launch, and to now I've been able to scale with that company. And through that, other doors have opened for me. That I mean, it's been a blessing that I haven't even applied for. Other doors open, and I've had the opportunity to experience new design challenges with startups. And I've found that it's just something that I'm passionate about. So I ended up getting into this from wanting my own thing. I do still want to go back and launch my own platform now that I have the network, because I didn't know absolutely no one. But that's still the dream. But for now, I absolutely love consulting, and I love meeting different entrepreneurs. I have a special place in my heart for talking to people who are entrepreneurial, much like me, and where they got their passion and their drive from, and the pain points that they're really trying to reach. I love working with people who have found a pain point in their industry, and they're looking for a solution for it. And then I get to make it aesthetic as well. So it's every day is fun, you know.
I love that so much. I do have an entrepreneurial spirit too, as well, as you probably know, or definitely can sense. But I want to talk about your networking. How important was your network? And is that true? Your network is your net worth?
Ooh. For me, I would say the clients that I've gotten, I did when I first started off, like for all you new designers out there, I felt so weird networking on LinkedIn. I felt very uncomfortable, like saying like, hi, I applied to this job, and, I think I'm a good fit. Here's my resume. And although I did get a few bites off of that, that is not where I got the majority of my work from. Um, one of my main clients, she actually came from LinkedIn, and we networked and we just clicked. And we met through the group, I think it's called Sister Circle. We met through that group, and it's just a whole bunch of beautiful Black women connecting in tech. And we actually used to do like a meetup out here. And so I've met plenty of other women in tech. And although I haven't received any jobs based off of that specific group from our LA outing, it's a beautiful thing to see people connect with one another, like even over like our Facebook messages, and let each other know like, hey, our job boards are accepting applications, or and really lifting each other up. Another place that I have connected with is actually through Upwork. Some of my work has come through Upwork where I didn't even apply, just through my profile. And to be honest, I never really worked on my profile. I have no clue how they found me. Just so, and then the rest though is from my first contract. One of the leaders on our team, leaders of product, VP of product actually, he has his own, I believe, firm, and he contracts out other people. And through that, I've met, PMs and other developers who I've gotten the opportunity to work with, who may live, all over the place. And then even with the startups, some of the contracting companies that I originally started with when launching the platform, they reached out to me because they enjoyed working with me on that platform. So I feel like a lot of the work has really been sprouted out from where I've already been at. Other agencies that have come in who have enjoyed working with me, and I may get like a bite on that. So I do believe I should be a little bit better about my networking. I'm not gonna lie, but everything so far from me has mostly been word of mouth, I would say.
Those are the best referrals, though, right? Those are the best ways to network, because you're already vetted. They know what to kind of expect. It's a warm lead, if you will.
Yeah, it's a nice warm lead. I think that's a nice way to say it. But no, that's pretty much how everything has happened. And then like the other two, like I said, I just believe they were just a blessing, because I never applied or anything like that. So someone directly reached out. But I do want to get better with networking on some of these social platforms. That way I can actually help other people, because sometimes when my workload is too big, I do try to, send work out to other people so they can at least have the opportunity to grow their portfolio, and become better designers themselves.
So give me some pros and cons of being a senior product designer.
I feel like I work 7 days a week.
I love to work though. I love to work.
I feel like I work 7 days a week, and parts of me is like I'm also a consultant, so I kind of make my own schedule. But that means that I have to actually work those hours and really do the work myself. So I'm not subscribed to a schedule. But this also means that, um, if I don't do the work one day, I'm going to be working extra another day. Another thing with consulting is sometimes a lot of work. I always say I'd rather be bombarded with work than have no work at all. So I always try to have like a consistent gig going. What else? Managing, I have dealt with a few clients where there's some people who don't really have boundaries when it comes to time. So sometimes putting my foot down, it's like a uncomfortable conversation to have sometimes, but like you don't want a client calling you at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not yeah.
That happens?
It's happened to me a few times, but it's because I didn't put my foot down in the beginning, and I've dealt with, a client in a rush trying to get something to like an investor, and wanted to change something last minute in the middle of the night. So I've had stuff like that happen to me before as well. So I guess that's like, it's people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So having like the boundaries that are going to fit for your schedule and that fit for your work type. So, what else? I mean, it's never really the work. Like I enjoy what I do. I enjoy that I can mix it up. If I'm tired of doing wireframes 1 minute, I'll just pop on over to another project and do some information architecture. If I'm tired of designing for the day, like maybe I'll go back and I'll do some research on something else that needs to be done. I just know that it's as long as within the business goals of the platform, and as long as I can pitch to the stakeholder or the design team or whoever I'm working with at that point in time, as long as I can pitch why this design is going to be the best design for their business, I'm all good.
So now I'm thinking right now. So what are the tools, the software that you use? Because if you can go from design to research to all these different components, what tools do you use to stay on track?
On a daily basis, I'm constantly on, well, obviously Figma. I haven't used Sketch in forever. Sorry, Sketch. But currently Figma, I use every single day. I'm on Slack every single day. I've used Balsamic. I've used User Zoom. I've used, InVision. I've used Notion and Jira. Like currently with one of the companies I'm working with, I'm now assigning tickets to the developers to like build stuff for the component library. So I use Jira a lot. I like Jira though. What else? I'm constantly, if I'm doing like a Webflow site, like right now I'm working on a Webflow site for someone. So I'm on a combination of Webflow and Figma. What other tools do I use? That's like off the top of my head. It varies on a day-to-day basis, but almost every day I'm on Figma and Slack.
Now I've been watching on TikTok and IG, in the creator or the design community. So there's conversations about what's more important, right? Is it experience or is it the actual, your resume, the projects that you've worked on?
I think there's a combination. Like I've definitely been, I'll be completely honest with you guys. Having the experience is great, but I think there's like two types of designers. There's the designers that are out there who are always going to be researching and learning how to grow. And then there's the ones that like just know their job really well, and they kind of just, stay where they are, and they may be really good at that one job, but they're not learning as technology continues to advance. although I do believe experience is great, because like I said, I haven't really been doing this for a super long time, and most senior designers are going to be in the 5 to 7 year range realistically. But I will say that typically, like in a corporate world, when you've been a designer for that long, you're really getting to work on certain projects and have certain experiences that you would probably never receive, like in the first couple years. The only reason that I've had the opportunity to do that is because I've been thrown into it working in the startup space. Also, I think there's a way that senior designers know how to communicate their design decisions to stakeholders. You can really tell the difference between how, someone who's just now starting off in design. I think it's a good practice when you're in design or starting out to really learn how to pitch your designs like on a daily basis, like every day's a pitch. Because it's really not so much about it like looking good or like, yeah, this is the user flow, and yeah, but what problem did your design solve? And I think it's really easy. Well, in the beginning for me, I didn't really understand it in the beginning, where I'd be like, okay, this is the flow, this is this, but I could never really think about the why, because although I knew the why, I never got in the habit of talking to the stakeholders about the why and how it's going to benefit not only the users, but their business as a whole. And so I do think experience like that, it takes practice. It takes practice to do that. As far as the resume goes, I mean, I guess it depends. Like people like me, I've only done mostly projects. I've popped around from I have my long-term projects, and then I have like short-term projects that I'm on. I do believe longevity with certain companies definitely helps, but even you'll see, like I've noticed applying for like corporate gigs, they'll say like, we want you to have this many years of experience, but we want you to be able to do, with a focus on design systems. Well, if you were working 3 years for a company and you were just held, like unless you were in an agency where you will get that versatility, if you were just held in one position, and you're working on a few things here or there, but you're never given the challenge or the opportunity, it's hard to grow. So you either have to put yourself out there. I feel like you either have to put yourself out there with like a side gig to challenge yourself even more if someone gives you that opportunity. Like I think it's a mixture of the two. Because I've definitely heard of plenty of designers that kind of like just, they stay where they're at. And then also with the phase that we're in right now, with everything going on with the economy, you have to diversify yourself. You have to know a little bit of something. And I think that's why product design, like the term is so huge now, because I believe companies are wanting really more bang for their buck as people are being put out in these boot camps and they're learning the basis of design. But I'm going to tell you this, like, although I did learn the process from boot camp, I don't feel like I've ever worked with a company directly like the process. Mm-hmm. I've never gotten into a company and I'm like, okay, I want to do research first. They're like, well, we already did the research and here it is for you to go over, or we already have a UX researcher. I think that was one of the biggest things that threw me off. Like, you learn the process, but you really need those real world experiences.
So can we talk about like the interview process, right? So looking at your resume, looking at your portfolio, do you have things that I see you have some stuff that's coming up, right? That you'll be updating your resume, but what are some of the things like far as the interview process that you would give like tips and advice, like when a consultant or a candidate is going into that interview?
One of my biggest mistakes when I first started off was when I would do an interview and they'd be like, tell me about yourself. I would really tell them about myself. Don't ever do that. But I'm pretty sure you get it all the time too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Really, if someone's telling you to tell them about yourself, you're really telling them about like a few seconds about yourself, but really how what you're doing is in alignment with what the company or where the company is headed based off of like what they're asking for, what the application may say. When you're doing a portfolio presentation, you really want to be able to tell a story. Like, if you're talking about a user journey and you're talking about the user experience, people want to hear a story. And it's very, very easy doing a 45-minute presentation somehow, you know, I hate to say this word, but like droning on about like one in particular thing, or getting lost in the process, not really having a good story to tell, and how like you went from, it's easy to lose the problem statement to like what the solution is along the way. So make sure you have a great journey to tell, and be yourself. Be yourself. If a company does not gel with you, from how you are, like in your interviews, you're not going to want to probably work with them long term anyway. So I'm like always typically myself. What else? I would say practicing whiteboarding sessions. And I say that because I actually just did not do the greatest job on a whiteboarding session not too long ago. And looking at different ways, like I would just go on YouTube. If you have a friend in tech, do like a virtual whiteboarding session with them. And being able to, I've done interviews also where always have your stuff ready. Like I've gotten on like a first screening interview where the person said, pull up your work and start talking me through it. So it's really knowing everything like the back of your hand, and it's your work. You should be able to tell your story and tell your process and your involvement in it. And I mean, that's probably my bit of advice for interviews. Just tell your story and your involvement in building for whatever you did. And also, companies love numbers. They love numbers. So if you've like made any company scale from one percentage to another, always bring up numbers. Always bring up how you've worked cross-functionally. That was the hardest thing for me when I first started. I didn't get a lot of cross-functional work. It was like, oh, just design this or like post this here. And so when I would get into interviews and they would talk about, okay, how do you work with the dev team? Like, that's one of those things that comes with experience. Like, you just won't know how to do it. In all different teams, they function differently. Like, a handoff to one developer is going to be completely different on one team than another. And being able to adjust to that.
Wow. Yeah. You're educating me so much, and I'm pretty sure the listeners that are listening online or they're watching on YouTube, their mind is like, right? Like, you're giving so many gems. So one word to describe, right? Or how would you give somebody encouragement using one word? Okay. Like on this, like coming up after you, trying to get in the product space, what would you give them?
My bit of advice for someone coming up in the product space is to not only always be up for a challenge. The only way you're going to grow is if you challenge yourself. And so whether it may be your challenge is networking with other people or learning how to talk to stakeholders, or like AI is really huge right now, like learning how to design within that space, or have a specialization and always be up for a challenge. And some of the best things that I'm good at are the ones that I really didn't know in the beginning. And I think also finding that person, probably that one person on your team or a few people on your team, if you are on one, be afraid to ask questions. You'll save yourself the heartache and the time, money. Like, just don't be afraid for a challenge. Love it. Where can people find you online on social media? Oh, at bluebuffington.com. I was about to say .com. At Bleu Buffington on Instagram. Or go to bluechanel.co to look at my portfolio. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Just remember the name spelled like the cheese. Well, thank you so much, Bleu, for coming on. Hey, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and hit Bleu up if you guys have any questions. Until next time, peace and love.